what happens when the very rules, the ones designed to make democracy work, actually become tools in a political fight?
Yeah, it's a fascinating tension, isn't it? How procedure itself becomes the battleground.
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at legislative procedures, think filibusters,
Mhm.
and also how electoral maps get drawn.
Right. We've got some interesting sources for this. An academic look at the U.S. Senate filibuster, its history, how it started, how it works now.
And we also have this collection of public comments from Texas. People there are really debating a proposal to redraw congressional districts, but not after a census, mid-decade.
Which is pretty unusual.
So our mission really is to see how these things, parliamentary tactics, boundary lines on a map, how they actually shape who gets a voice in government.
And why these kinds of fights seem almost, well, baked into the system. They're pretty old.
Okay, so let's start with Texas. It's happening right now, this intense debate over redrawing districts midstream.
Yeah, the sources really show people weighing in on this bill, HB4. And the core issue is redrawing congressional districts now, not waiting for 2030.
That definitely seems like it would stir things up.
Oh, absolutely. What's really striking is just how many people commented and the passion behind it. A lot of Texans are strongly against HB4.
What are they saying?
Well, you hear phrases like blatant power grab or cheating the system. The argument isn't really that populations have shifted dramatically enough to warrant this now.
So what's the argument for it then, from their perspective? Or rather, what are the opponents saying is the real reason?
Opponents are...
Which is a huge deal, especially when you consider, as the sources note, that minority groups are driving almost all the recent population growth in Texas.
Exactly. That context is crucial. So critics are using pretty strong language, calling it racial gerrymandering.
Racial gerrymandering. And they talk about how it does that, like the mechanics.
Yeah, they say it breaks up neighborhoods that tend to vote together, splitting communities of interest, and also this tactic called packing.
Packing, right? Can you explain that quickly?
Sure. Packing means you cram as many voters from the opposing party or a specific demographic group into just a few districts.
So those districts become overwhelmingly safe for that group.
Right. But it means their votes are sort of wasted there in terms of statewide influence because they have far less impact in all the other districts. It limits their overall power.
Gotcha. And these critics, are they tying it to anything specific?
Some comments we saw directly mention this alleged request from former President Trump, supposedly asking allies in Texas to get him 5 more seats in Congress.
Nice.
They see that as the motivation here.
Wow. Okay, so that really brings up big questions about fairness, transparency.
Definitely. A lot of the comments hammer that point. They feel there wasn't enough public input, that the whole process felt rushed.
And there's another layer too, right? The existing maps.
Yes, that's a major point. The maps Texas drew back in 2021 are already being challenged in court.
On what grounds?
Allegations that they violate the Voting Rights Act and also the 14th and 15th Amendments. Equal protection, voting rights, regardless of race.
So people are saying, hold on, sort out the existing legal mess before drawing new lines.
Exactly. And focus on other things like flood relief, things communities really need right now.
But look, politics is rarely one-sided. Were there voices supporting this HB4 in the comments?
Oh, yes. There were definitely people defending it. Some argued that the current maps don't accurately reflect the electorate anymore.
Okay, so they see it as a correction.
Sort of, or bringing Texas back into compliance, as they put it, with what they see as fair representation. And it's true, Texas has grown massively. We're talking nearly 3 million people added between 2020 and estimates for 2025.
That's a huge number.
Yeah.
So supporters are saying, look, the state has changed, the maps need to change to keep representation fair under the Constitution.
That's the argument. And one comment was quite blunt about it, saying something like, it's about time Republicans play hardball.
So that really lays it bare. It's this fundamental clash over what fair representation even means.
Precisely. And is power something you primarily earn through policies and winning arguments, or is it something you can, maybe should, secure by drawing the lines favorably?
Earned versus secured power. That's a really interesting way to put it.
It highlights how the rules themselves, the process, becomes part of the political strategy.
Yeah, it makes you think about how often the fight isn't just about the policies, but about the rules of the fight itself. And this struggle, this tension between, say, majority desires and protecting minority influence, it brings us neatly to another big procedural battlefield, the U.S. Senate and the filibuster.
Right. It's another example of how rules, or the lack thereof, can shape outcomes dramatically.
And the filibuster, historically, wasn't always seen as this noble tradition of debate, was it? Some people really disliked it early on.
No, not at all. Some critics called it a vital defect in the Senate. One source even says it was seen as trampling constitutional principles.
Strong words.
Yeah, one academic, white, writing back in '68, basically said it damaged the Senate's reputation.
And it had real-world consequences, right? Especially concerning civil rights.
Absolutely. Southern Democrats famously used it quite effectively to block civil rights bills for decades, really from the 40s into the early 60s.
So civil rights groups obviously wanted reform.
It was a top priority for them. They saw the filibuster as a major obstacle to progress.
So let's picture it back then. What did filibustering actually involve? Was it just, one person talking endlessly like in the movies?
Sometimes, but it was often more than just talking. And crucially, for a long time, obstructing wasn't easy or free. It had costs.
Okay, how so?
Well, besides long speeches, you had these things called dilatory motions. Basically procedural tricks just to waste time, like constantly moving to adjourn or asking for quorum calls.
Quorum calls. Remind us what those are.
It's basically forcing a count to see if enough senators are physically present to even conduct business. If not, everything stops.
Ah, so you could just keep demanding counts.
Repeatedly. And the key thing was, the supporters of the bill being filibustered had to physically stay there to maintain that quorum.
So they couldn't just go home.
Nope. They had to sit out the filibuster. Sources mention senators being literally dragged out of bed by the sergeant-at-arms in the middle of the night to come back to the chamber.
Wow. So it wasn't just the person talking who suffered. It wore down both sides.
Exactly. It imposed real significant costs, time, energy, sleep on everyone involved. A true test of endurance.
A war of attrition, like you said. Sounds exhausting.
It really was.
And this wasn't always codified, right? Like the early Senate operated differently.
For sure. In the 19th century, it was much more about informal norms, cooperation, maybe a bit of gentleman's agreement.
But that started to break down.
Yeah. As the Senate got bigger, handled more business, those informal understandings weren't enough. You had figures like Senator Robert La Follette around the early 1900s.
La Follette. What did he do?
He was known for really pushing the boundaries of individual rights in debate. He'd use every procedural tool available, which apparently created bitter antagonisms.
Oh, I bet.
It even led to rule changes aimed specifically at him, like strictly enforcing a rule that you could only speak twice on the same issue in one legislative day.
The two-speech rule. And they tightened up quorum calls, too.
Yeah, they created new precedents to stop him from using those endlessly just to delay. It shows the system adapting, trying to cope.
So all this pressure, these tactics, eventually led somewhere concrete.
Right. It led to the big change in 1917, the cloture rule, Redistricting 2.
Cloture. That's the mechanism to actually end a filibuster, right?
Exactly. It allows the Senate to vote to cut off debate and move to a final vote on the bill itself. Today, it generally needs that 3/5 majority, 60 votes.
But here's the interesting thing. They don't always actually have that cloture vote, do they? Even when a filibuster is threatened.
That's a key point. One writer, Haynes, back in 1938, made this argument that the power of the cloture rule often comes from just knowing it exists.
So a threat is the real weapon.
In many cases, yes. The mere threat that a supermajority could cut off debate is often enough to force compromises or change a bill or even stop it from coming up for a vote at all.
So a minority can still exert a lot of influence without anyone having to talk for 24 hours straight.
Precisely. And other things helped manage debate too, like unanimous consent agreements or UCAs. Since 1914, these became formally binding.
UCAs, those are like pre-agreed rules for debating a specific bill.
Yeah, basically all senators agree on the time limits, amendments allowed, that sort of thing. It streamlines the process, avoiding a potential filibuster showdown.
That makes sense, but that threat still looms. And you mentioned timing being critical too, like lame duck sessions.
Oh, absolutely. When a session has a hard end date, like before a new Congress comes in, anyone trying to obstruct gets a massive advantage.
Because the clock is automatically on their side.
Right.
They just have to run it out.
Exactly. The cost of delay skyrockets for the bill's supporters. They might have to give up huge concessions just to get anything passed before time expires.
So tying this all together, whether it's the filibuster's long history or these intense fights over Texas redistricting today,
it really shines a light on that fundamental tension in democracy, doesn't it? balancing what the majority wants with protecting the rights and influence of the minority.
And it shows just how much the rules themselves, formal or informal, dictate who wins, who loses, and whose voice ultimately matters in politics. So where does that leave us? We've seen these battles over process from the Senate floor to map drawing rooms in state capitals. They're as old as the country, really.
And still incredibly relevant. We saw the filibuster change from this physically demanding ordeal
To more of a strategic threat, shaping legislation behind the scenes.
Right. And in Texas, we see citizens fiercely debating redistricting, some seeing it as political manipulation, others as a necessary adjustment to population changes.
It really underscores that knowledge is power, doesn't it? Understanding how these mechanisms work, how rules are made, changed, challenged.
Absolutely critical for anyone who wants to be an engaged citizen. You have to appreciate how the formal rules, the informal norms, and public opinion all interact.
So as you think about all this, the constant push and pull between the will of the majority and the need to protect minorities in our system, maybe ask yourself this. When does one of these tools, like the filibuster or the redistricting process, serve as a legitimate check on power, ensuring everyone gets a hearing? And when does it cross the line and become an instrument of power itself, maybe used to lock in an advantage or silence opponents?
That's the core question, isn't it? Where is that line?